The night shift at Memorial Hospital was winding down, and Janelle Carter was looking forward to going home. Her feet ached after 12 hours of walking the polished floors of the emergency room. The last hour of any shift was always the longest, but Janelle had learned long ago that in the ER, you never counted your shift as over until you were actually in your car driving away. Janelle poured herself a cup of coffee at the nurse's station, the harsh fluorescent lights making the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced. At 42, she had spent the last 15 years as an emergency nurse, and every line on her face told stories of lives saved and lost. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, a few gray strands escaping around her temples. "You look like you could use something stronger than that coffee," said Tina, the night receptionist, glancing up from her computer screen. Janelle smiled tiredly. "Don't tempt me. My daughter has a science project due tomorrow, and I promised I'd help her when I get home." "Does that girl ever sleep?" "It's almost dawn," Tina chuckled. "Teenagers," Janelle shrugged. "Keisha's probably just starting to work on it now. You know how they are with deadlines." The radio on the wall crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. An ambulance was inbound with multiple trauma patients from a military training exercise gone wrong. Estimated arrival, 7 minutes. Janelle set down her coffee, untouched. Just like that, the slow drag of the end of her shift transformed into the sharp focus of an emergency. She moved quickly to prep the trauma rooms. Her fatigue forgotten, Dr. Philip Reeves, the attending physician, swept into the ER looking too fresh for 6 a.m. New to Memorial, Dr. Reeves had been working there for only 6 months. He was competent enough, but Janelle had noticed he tended to follow protocols to the letter, sometimes missing the human element that experienced nurses recognized. Still, he was the doctor and she was the nurse. "What do we have?" he asked, tying his surgical mask. "Multiple injuries from a training accident, Marines. That's all we know," Janelle replied, checking supplies. The ambulances arrived with their lights flashing against the pre-dawn darkness. Paramedics rushed in with 3 stretchers. The first 2 Marines had obvious but non-critical injuries: a broken arm, a dislocated shoulder, cuts and bruises. The third was different. Staff Sergeant Michael Rivera, 28, the paramedic reported as they wheeled him in. Blunt force trauma to chest and abdomen from equipment failure. BP dropping, pulse rapid and weak. Possible internal bleeding. Janelle and Dr. Reeves took Rivera into Trauma Room 1 while other staff handled the less critical patients. The Marine's face was ashen beneath his tan. His breathing labored. As they transferred him to the hospital bed, Janelle noticed his fingernails had a subtle blue tinge. Dr. Reeves began his assessment, barking orders for IV fluids, blood work, and imaging. Janelle moved efficiently, placing lines and monitors. But something about Rivera's condition nagged at her. His oxygen saturation was lower than it should be, even with the chest trauma. His skin felt cool to the touch despite the warm blanket they'd placed over him. "Doctor, his O2 stats are dropping," Janelle pointed out. "And I'm seeing jugular distension," Dr. Reeves nodded. "That's expected with chest trauma. We'll get chest films and see what we're dealing with. Continue the protocol." Janelle did as instructed, but her unease grew. 15 years in the ER had given her an intuition about patients, a sense when something wasn't following the expected pattern. Rivera's blood pressure continued to fall despite the fluids they were pumping into him. The monitor's beeping became more urgent. "He needs a chest tube," Dr. Reeves decided after reviewing the initial x-rays. "Prep for insertion." Janelle prepared the equipment, but as she watched Rivera, something else caught her attention. A very slight shift in the trachea position, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Combined with the distended neck veins dropping blood pressure, and the mechanism of injury, "Doctor," she said carefully, "I think it might be cardiac tamponade." Dr. Reeves gave her a dismissive glance. "The films don't indicate that. We're proceeding with the chest tube for pneumothorax." Janelle hesitated, torn between protocol and her growing certainty. Rivera's stats were deteriorating rapidly. The cardiac monitor showed electrical alternans, another sign of fluid around the heart that the doctor was missing. "His pulse is getting weaker," she tried again. "And look at his rhythm. Classic electrical alternans." "Nurse Carter, please follow the protocol," Dr. Reeves said sharply. "This is clearly a tension pneumothorax based on the presentation." Janelle bit her lip. If she was right and they delayed, Rivera could die within minutes. If she was wrong and she pushed back too hard, she could face disciplinary action. But looking at the Marine's face, someone's son, Perhaps someone's husband or father. The choice became clear. With respect, doctor, I strongly believe this is cardiac tamponade requiring immediate pericardiocentesis, she said firmly. The signs are all there if you look closely. The doctor's eyes hardened above his mask. That's not what the protocol indicates based on these films. Please assist with the chest tube or step aside for someone who will. At that moment, Rivera's stats plummeted. The monitors blared as his heart rate dropped dangerously. His body was shutting down. He's crashing, Janelle called out. Dr. Reeves began preparing for emergency intubation, still convinced the airway was the primary issue. But Janelle knew they didn't have time for the doctor to realize his mistake. Years of experience and countless emergency situations had prepared her for this moment, when following her training and instincts meant breaking the chain of command. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the pericardiocentesis tray she had positioned nearby. "We're losing him," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "I'm performing emergency pericardiocentesis." Dr. Reeves looked up, stunned. "Nurse Carter, you are not authorized. He'll be dead in 2 minutes if we don't," she cut in, already swabbing the area with antiseptic. Her hands moved with practiced precision despite the gravity of her decision. "This is completely against protocol." "Stop immediately," Dr. Reeves demanded, but made no physical move to stop her, perhaps realizing the patient was indeed failing rapidly. Janelle inserted the needle, angled it carefully toward Rivera's heart, then slowly advanced it while watching the cardiac monitor. When she felt a subtle give and began to withdraw bloody fluid into the syringe, Rivera's vitals started to stabilize almost immediately. "Cardiac tamponade," she said quietly, continuing to drain the fluid that had been compressing the Marine's heart. The blunt trauma caused bleeding into the pericardial sac. The room fell silent except for the beeping of the monitors, now steadier, stronger. Dr. Reeves stared at her, his face a mixture of shock and fury. The nurses and techs who had gathered during the crisis exchanged glances, some with subtle nods of approval. Rivera's color improved visibly as his heart, freed from compression, began pumping effectively again. By the time Janelle had finished the procedure and secured a drain, his vital signs had stabilized. "Get a cardiology consult," she said to one of the other nurses, "and inform the OR we may need them." Dr. Reeves removed his gloves with a snap. "Nurse Carter, outside now." His voice was controlled but ice cold. In the hallway, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You directly violated protocol and my explicit instructions. You performed a procedure you are not authorized to perform independently." Janelle met his gaze steadily. "I respect the protocols, doctor, but in this case they would have failed that Marine. The signs were clear to me." "That's not your call to make," he hissed. "This is gross insubordination. I'm reporting this to administration immediately." "Do what you need to do," Janelle replied, her voice quiet but firm. "But that man is alive because I acted." "We'll see what the medical director has to say about that," Dr. Reeves said before stalking away. Janelle returned to Rivera's side, checking his vitals and adjusting his medications. The cardiology team arrived minutes later, confirming her diagnosis and commending the emergency procedure that had saved the Marine's life. As her shift finally ended, 2 hours late, Janelle documented everything meticulously in Rivera's chart. She knew the consequences would be coming, but watching Rivera's steady breathing, seeing the color return to his face, she couldn't regret her decision. On her way out, Rivera's 2 fellow Marines, now treated and waiting for news, stopped her. "How is he?" asked one, his arm in a sling. "Staff Sergeant Rivera is stable," she assured them. "The cardiologist is with him now, but he's doing much better." The relief on their faces was palpable. The second Marine, sporting a bandage across his forehead, reached out to shake her hand. "Thank you, ma'am. Mike's got a wife and baby at home. They need him to come back." Janelle nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "He's a fighter, and he's in good hands now." As she finally walked to her car in the morning light, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the hospital administration. "Report to HR before your next shift regarding an incident under investigation." Janelle sighed deeply, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd made the right call. Some rules were meant to be broken when lives hung in the balance. As she drove home to help Keisha with her science project, she pushed away thoughts of what this might mean for her career. For now, a Marine was alive who might not have been otherwise. Today, that had to be enough. Janelle's house was quiet when she finally got home, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen windows. She had expected to find Keisha frantically working on her science project, but instead, her daughter was fast asleep on the couch, textbooks and notes scattered around her. Janelle smiled despite her exhaustion. She gently removed the pencil from Keisha's hand and draped a blanket over her. In the kitchen, Janelle made a fresh pot of coffee, her mind replaying the events at the hospital. She kept seeing Staff Sergeant Rivera's face, the color returning as she drained the fluid from around his heart. She didn't regret her decision, not for a second. But the reality of what might happen next weighed heavily on her shoulders. The coffee maker gurgled to completion as Keisha shuffled into the kitchen, hair wild from sleep, still wrapped in the blanket. "You're late," she mumbled, reaching for a mug. At 17, Keisha was the spitting image of Janelle at that age. The same determined eyes, the same stubborn tilt of the chin. "Rough morning," Janelle replied. "Emergency case came in right at the end of my shift." Keisha nodded, understanding. She had grown up with a mother whose schedule was unpredictable at best. "Did you save them?" "Yeah," Janelle said softly. "Yeah, we did." She didn't mention the rest, the confrontation with Dr. Reeves, the text from administration. "No need to worry, Keisha, yet, so." "About that science project help you promised," Keisha began, looking hopeful. Janelle laughed. "Let me grab a shower first. Then we'll tackle photosynthesis together." After helping Keisha with her project and making them both lunch, Janelle finally crawled into bed, setting her alarm for just 4 hours later. She needed to prepare for her meeting with HR before her evening shift. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams of beeping monitors and falling vital signs kept jerking her awake. When her alarm finally went off, she felt more exhausted than before. The hospital looked different in the afternoon light as Janelle parked in her usual spot. She had arrived an hour before her shift to meet with HR, dressed in her street clothes, dark slacks and a simple blouse. As she walked through the main entrance rather than the staff door, she felt strangely like a visitor in the place she had worked for the last 7 years. The HR office was on the 3rd floor, away from the bustle of patient care. Janelle took a deep breath before knocking on the door marked, "Diane Wilson, Human Resources Director." Inside, Diane wasn't alone. Dr. Alan Patel, the medical director, and Christine Wong, the chief nursing officer, sat beside her desk. Dr. Reeves was conspicuously absent. "Nurse Carter, please have a seat." Diane gestured to an empty chair facing the 3 of them. Janelle sat back straight, hands folded in her lap. "I assume this is about what happened with Staff Sergeant Rivera this morning." Dr. Patel nodded gravely. "We've reviewed the incident report filed by Dr. Reeves as well as the patient's chart. We understand you performed an unauthorized pericardiocentesis against the direct orders of the attending physician. Is that correct?" "Yes," Janelle said simply. "The patient was showing clear signs of cardiac tamponade. He was crashing. There wasn't time to debate the diagnosis, but you are aware that such a procedure is outside your scope of practice as a registered nurse?" Christine asked, her expression unreadable. "Under normal circumstances, yes," Janelle agreed. "But in an emergency situation where a life is at immediate risk, nurses are trained to act. I've been certified in advanced cardiac life support for 15 years. I knew what I was seeing and what needed to be done." Dr. Reeves states that he had assessed the situation and determined a different course of treatment, Diane said, consulting a file in front of her. "He was wrong," Janelle said plainly, and Staff Sergeant Rivera would have died waiting for Dr. Reeves to realize that. "The cardiology team confirmed my diagnosis." Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "While the outcome was positive in this case, Nurse Carter, the issue is one of protocol and chain of command. Hospitals function on clear lines of authority. If every nurse decided to overrule physician orders based on their own assessment—" "I didn't make the decision lightly," Janelle interrupted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "In 15 years, I have never gone against a doctor's orders. But I stand by my judgment in this case." Christine leaned forward. "Your record here has been exemplary, Janelle. Not a single complaint until now. That's why this situation is particularly difficult." Janelle felt a chill. "Difficult how?" The 3 exchanged glances before Diane spoke again. "The hospital is in a delicate position. If we condone your actions even implicitly, we create a precedent that could lead to liability issues. Dr. Reeves has demanded disciplinary action." Are you saying I'm being punished for saving a patient's life? Janelle asked incredulously. We're saying that procedures exist for a reason, Dr. Patel replied. And while your intentions were good, what's happening to Staff Sergeant Rivera? Janelle cut in. Dr. Patel blinked at the interruption. He's been transferred to the cardiac unit. His prognosis is good. The cardiothoracic surgeon believes he won't need further intervention beyond monitoring and medication, so he'll make a full recovery, Janelle stated flatly, because of the procedure I performed. Yes, Christine admitted. But that doesn't change the fact that protocols were violated. Diane slid a document across the desk. We've had to make a difficult decision, Nurse Carter. Effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave pending further review. However, she hesitated. Given the circumstances and Dr. Reeves's insistence, the administration has decided to terminate your employment. Janelle stared at the paper in front of her, the words swimming before her eyes. You're firing me? With 2 weeks severance, Diane added as if that made it better. You'll maintain your benefits through the end of the month. We're prepared to provide a general reference confirming your employment dates, but we cannot endorse your clinical judgment given these events. The room seemed to close in around Janelle. 7 years at Memorial, 15 years as a nurse, all ending because she had trusted her training and instincts to save a life. This isn't right, she said quietly, and you all know it. Christine at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. For what it's worth, many of the nursing staff have expressed support for your actions. But our hands are tied by hospital policy. What about Dr. Reeves? Janelle asked. Will there be any review of his failure to recognize a classic presentation of cardiac tamponade? Dr. Patel stiffened. Dr. Reeves's clinical judgment is not under scrutiny at this time. The issue here is one of insubordination and performing procedures outside your scope of practice. Janelle stood, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. I'd like to see Staff Sergeant Rivera before I leave. I'm afraid that wouldn't be appropriate under the circumstances, Diane said. Security will escort you to collect your personal items from your locker. Your badge access has already been deactivated. The humiliation of being escorted by security, of passing colleagues who watched with confused expressions, barely registered through Janelle's shock. She mechanically emptied her locker of the few personal items she kept there. A spare pair of reading glasses, a family photo, a cardigan for cold nights. The security guard, Tony, who she had known for years, looked deeply uncomfortable. This is crazy, Janelle, he muttered as they walked to the exit. Everyone's talking about what happened. The Marines from this morning were raising hell when they found out Rivera would have died without you. Janelle barely heard him. All she could think about was what she would tell Keisha, how they would pay the mortgage next month, how she would find another nursing position with a termination for insubordination on her record. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too ordinary for a day when her life had just fallen apart. Janelle sat in her car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, fighting back tears. She had been so sure of her actions in that trauma room, so certain that saving Rivera's life was worth any consequence. Now, facing the reality of those consequences, doubt crept in around the edges of her conviction. Her phone rang, startling her. The display showed her neighbor Lucia's number. Janelle, Lucia's voice was concerned. Are you okay? There are news vans outside your house. Keisha called me all upset, saying reporters were knocking on your door asking about some Marine you saved. News vans? Janelle echoed, confused. What are you talking about? It's all over social media, apparently, Lucia explained. Something about a black nurse getting fired after saving a Marine. Keisha's at my place now. She didn't know what to tell them. Janelle's mind raced. How had the story gotten out so quickly? Tell Keisha to stay with you. I'm on my way home now. As she drove, radio stations were already picking up the story. A local news break reported, controversy at Memorial Hospital today as sources claim an experienced nurse was terminated after performing a life-saving procedure against doctor's orders. The patient, identified as a U.S. Marine injured in a training accident, is reportedly in stable condition thanks to the nurse's intervention. The hospital has declined to comment, citing personnel confidentiality. Turning onto her street, Janelle's jaw dropped. 3 news vans were indeed parked near her modest home, reporters standing with microphones at the ready. Neighbors peered from windows and porches, watching the unusual activity in their normally quiet neighborhood. Janelle drove past her house without stopping. heading straight for Lucia's place 3 blocks over. As she parked, her phone buzzed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Nurse Carter, my name is Anthony Diaz. I'm a medical malpractice attorney. We need to talk about what happened at Memorial Hospital today. This isn't over. Call me." Sitting in her car, staring at her phone, Janelle realized that while one chapter of her life had just ended abruptly, something else entirely was beginning. In less than 24 hours, everything had changed, and it wasn't done changing yet. Lucia's living room had become an impromptu war room. Keisha sat cross-legged on the floor, her laptop open, scrolling through social media with wide eyes. Lucia's husband, Ray, was on his phone, speaking in hushed tones by the window. And Janelle, still in a daze, sat on the couch watching her life unfold on Lucia's television. "Mom, you've gone viral," Keisha said, looking up from her screen. "The Marines who were with Staff Sergeant Rivera posted about what happened this morning. It's been shared thousands of times already." Janelle shook her head in disbelief. "But how did they even know I was fired?" "That just happened a couple hours ago." "Hospital staff," Lucia guessed, bringing in a tray of coffee mugs. "You said the nurses supported what you did. Someone must have leaked it when they heard the administration's decision." On the TV, a reporter stood outside Memorial Hospital. Sources inside the hospital confirmed that the nurse in question performed an emergency procedure that cardiology specialists later determined was both necessary and appropriate. The Marine, whose identity has not been released, is reported to be in stable condition. However, hospital administration has allegedly terminated the nurse's employment for insubordination and violating protocols. The camera cut to 2 Marines in uniform standing outside the hospital entrance, the same 2 who had been with Rivera. Janelle recognized the one with his arm in a sling. "Staff Sergeant Rivera is our brother," he was saying firmly to the reporter. "The nurse who saved him is Janelle Carter, and what the hospital did to her is wrong. She saw what needed to be done and she did it. That's what we're trained to do too. Act decisively when lives are on the line. Instead of firing her, they should be giving her a medal." Janelle's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications. Former colleagues, friends from nursing school, even patients she had cared for years ago were reaching out with messages of support, and the calls from reporters kept coming. She had stopped answering numbers she didn't recognize. "You should talk to that lawyer who texted you," Ray said, joining them after finishing his call. "This isn't just unfair, it might be illegal. They can't fire you for doing your job." "Technically, I wasn't doing my job," Janelle sighed. "I was doing the doctor's job. That's the problem." Keisha looked up from her laptop again. "Mom, you need to see this. Someone started an online petition called Justice for Nurse Carter. It's got over 5,000 signatures already." Janelle was about to respond when her phone rang with a number she did recognize, her mother's. She stepped into Lucia's kitchen to take the call. "Baby, are you okay?" Her mother's voice was full of concern. "I just saw you on the news down here in Atlanta. What in the world is going on?" Janelle leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "It's a long story, Mom." "Well, I've got time. Tell me everything." By the time Janelle finished explaining, her mother was indignant. "So they fired you for saving that young man's life?" "Oh no, baby. That's not right. Not right at all." "I know, Mom, but what can I do? It's their hospital, their rules." "Since when did you become the type to just lie down and take it?" her mother challenged. "The Janelle I raised stands up for what's right. And what they did to you isn't right." A soft knock on the kitchen door frame interrupted them. It was Ray holding out his phone to her. "Someone's calling for you on our landline," he said. "Says he's calling from Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Asked for you by name." Janelle's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Mom, I gotta go. I'll call you back." She took Ray's phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Hello, this is Janelle Carter." "Ms. Carter, my name is Colonel James Wilson. I'm the Chief of Medical Services at Walter Reed." The voice was deep, authoritative. "I've been hearing quite a lot about you today." "Yes, sir," Janelle replied, not knowing what else to say. "What you did this morning took courage and skill. The kind of judgment under pressure that can't be taught," Colonel Wilson continued. "I've spoken with the cardiothoracic surgeon who's consulting on Staff Sergeant Rivera's case. He confirmed your assessment and intervention were spot on." "Thank you, sir," Janelle said softly. "I'm not calling just to offer praise, Ms. Carter. I'm calling to offer you a job. Walter Reed needs nurses with your experience and judgment. We value medical professionals who can think on their feet in crisis situations. That's what military medicine is all about. Janelle nearly dropped the phone. A job at Walter Reed? But you don't even know me. The colonel chuckled. I know enough, and I can learn the rest. The position would come with relocation assistance, of course. Think about it and let me know. My direct line will come through on your caller ID. When Janelle returned to the living room looking stunned, everyone turned to her expectantly. What happened? Who was it? Keisha asked. Walter Reed, Janelle said, still processing. They offered me a job. Ray whistled low. The military works fast. It's not just the military, Keisha said, turning her laptop around. Mom, look at this. The screen showed a video from Rivera's Marine unit. Dozens of Marines in uniform stood together, many holding signs with messages like, "Thank you, nurse. Carter and heroes save heroes." A Marine officer stepped forward to address the camera. Janelle Carter saved the life of one of our brothers today using her training, experience, and courage, and for that she lost her job. This is not how we treat people who risk everything to do the right thing. The men and women of the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, stand with Nurse Carter. We take care of our own, and today she became one of our own. Janelle sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, she had been an ordinary nurse doing her job. Now she was at the center of a growing movement. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Anthony Diaz, the lawyer. Ms. Carter, the Rivera family wants to meet with you. Please call me ASAP. While all this was unfolding, a different kind of storm was brewing at Memorial Hospital. The administration had gone into crisis mode as the story spread. Diane from HR had called an emergency meeting with the hospital board. Dr. Reeves was there, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the hospital's public relations nightmare escalated. The public is framing this as a dedicated nurse being punished for saving a Marine's life, the PR director explained grimly. We're being flooded with calls and emails. The Marines are organizing a protest outside the hospital for tomorrow morning. Several major medical associations have issued statements supporting Nurse Carter's actions under the emergency circumstances. This isn't about public opinion, Dr. Reeves insisted. It's about maintaining proper protocols and chains of command. An older board member leaned forward. Philip, with all due respect, it became about public opinion the moment those Marines went on camera. Now it's about the hospital's reputation. And frankly, firing someone for saving a life doesn't look good from any angle. Back at Lucia's house, Janelle finally returned the lawyer's call. Ms. Carter, thank you for calling me back. Anthony Diaz's voice was warm, professional. I've been in contact with Staff Sergeant Rivera's family. His wife Maria specifically asked to speak with you. They're staying near the hospital while he recovers. Of course I'll meet with them, Janelle said immediately. How is he doing? Improving steadily according to the family. The doctors have told them that without your intervention, he almost certainly would not have survived. Janelle closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her. Whatever else happened, that knowledge made it all worthwhile. There's something else you should know, Diaz continued. I've been contacted by several medical professionals who faced similar situations, being reprimanded or terminated for acting outside strict protocols in emergency situations. Your case is highlighting a systemic problem in healthcare. Severa. Major medical journals are already planning articles about it. Janelle hadn't considered the broader implications. She had been focused on Rivera, on her job, on how to pay next month's bills. But now she began to see that her personal crisis had tapped into something much larger. A tension between rigid protocols and the human judgment that sometimes needed to override them. As evening fell, Janelle, Keisha, and their neighbors gathered around Lucia's TV to watch the national news. The anchor's voice was solemn as they led with the story. A black nurse in California was fired today after performing an emergency procedure that saved a U.S. Marine's life. The case has sparked outrage across medical communities and military families nationwide, raising questions about healthcare protocols and the consequences faced by those who break them, even when saving lives. The segment showed clips from social media, interviews with medical ethics experts, and statements from veterans organizations. By the time it ended, Janelle's phone had dozens of missed calls, news outlets seeking interviews, other hospitals offering positions, nursing organizations offering support and legal assistance. What are you going to do, Mom? Keisha asked, watching her mother's overwhelmed expression. Janelle took a deep breath. First, I'm going to meet Staff Sergeant Rivera's family tomorrow. Then I'm going to talk to this lawyer and understand my options. After that, she shrugged, a small smile finally breaking through her shock. I guess I need to decide where we might want to live. Sounds like I have some job offers to consider. Walter Reed is in Maryland, Keisha noted thoughtfully. They have really good schools there. Janelle reached out to squeeze her daughter's hand, grateful for her resilience, her quick adjustment to the possibility of change. One step at a time, baby. This morning I was just an ER nurse. Tonight I'm... She gestured at the TV, which was still showing her picture. Whatever this is, I need to figure out what it all means before making any big decisions. As they prepared to spend the night at Lucia's, away from the reporters still camped outside their home, Janelle's phone lit up with one more notification. It was a private message from a nurse at Memorial Hospital. Dr. Patel just called an emergency staff meeting for tomorrow morning. Word is, the board is reconsidering their position. This isn't over, Janelle. We're all behind you. Janelle set down her phone, feeling for the first time since her firing that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. In just 24 hours, her life had been completely upended. But as she looked at all the people rallying around her, she realized it wasn't falling apart. It was falling into place in a way she never could have imagined. The hospital cafeteria wasn't meant to host such important meetings. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the Memorial Hospital board members shifted uncomfortably in plastic chairs around tables normally occupied by tired nurses and doctors grabbing quick meals between rounds. Dr. Patel had called the emergency meeting for 7 a.m. before the Marines' planned protest could begin. Outside, the situation has escalated beyond our control, Dr. Patel admitted, looking haggard from a sleepless night. Our social media accounts have received over 50,000 comments. The phone lines are jammed with calls. News vans are parked outside all hospital entrances. Diane from HR nodded grimly. We've also received resignation letters from 3 ER nurses this morning, citing the treatment of Nurse Carter as their reason for leaving. Dr. Reeves, who had insisted on Janelle's termination, stared at the table, avoiding the pointed looks from other staff members. The night shift nurses, still in their scrubs, stood along the back wall, arms crossed, expressions unreadable. What are our options? Asked the board chairman, a retired surgeon who understood both the medical and public relations aspects of the crisis. The hospital's legal counsel cleared his throat. From a liability standpoint, Nurse Carter did violate protocols. However, the outcome was positive. The patient survived precisely because of her intervention. This creates a complex legal situation. The Marines are here, someone called from the doorway. The cafeteria fell silent as everyone turned toward the windows overlooking the hospital entrance. Outside, at least 100 Marines in uniform had formed neat rows on the lawn. They stood at parade rest, disciplined and organized, not shouting or waving signs, but their presence alone made a powerful statement. News cameras captured everything. My God, whispered Dr. Patel. They're not even being disruptive. This is worse. The PR director's phone buzzed. She read the message and looked up with dismay. CNN is going live with an interview with Staff Sergeant Rivera's wife in 5 minutes. She's thanking Nurse Carter for saving her husband and the father of their 2 children. The board chairman stood up. Enough. The optics of this situation are untenable. We need to find a solution that acknowledges both the necessity of protocols and the exceptional circumstances of this case. Dr. Reeves finally spoke. What if... He hesitated, then continued reluctantly. What if we admit that I may have missed the signs of cardiac tamponade? That would change the narrative from insubordination to a nurse using her training to catch something a doctor missed. A murmur ran through the room. It was a significant concession from a doctor whose pride had triggered this entire situation. That could work, the legal counsel nodded. Instead of firing Nurse Carter, we could frame this as a teachable moment about teamwork in healthcare. Show that we value staff who speak up when they see something concerning. We should offer her job back immediately, Diane suggested, with an apology and perhaps a promotion to a training position where she can share her expertise with other nurses. As the hospital scrambled to change course, Janelle was sitting in a quiet corner of a coffee shop near the hospital, face to face with Maria Rivera and her father-in-law, both clearly exhausted from their vigil at Staff Sergeant Rivera's bedside. Anthony Diaz, the lawyer, sat beside Janelle, occasionally jotting notes. The doctors told us this morning that Michael is being moved out of intensive care, Maria said, cradling her coffee cup with both hands. They say his heart function is improving faster than they expected. That's wonderful news, Janelle smiled, genuinely relieved. Cardiac tamponade can be devastating if not caught quickly, but with prompt treatment, most patients recover fully. The doctor who's treating him now told us that without your intervention, Michael would have died within minutes. Maria's voice broke slightly. Our youngest is only 10 months old. He wouldn't have even remembered his father. Mr. Rivera, a Vietnam veteran with silver hair and weathered hands, reached across the table toward Janelle. My son serves this country proudly. He understands duty and sacrifice. What you did, putting your job on the line to save him, that's the same kind of courage. Janelle felt tears threatening. She blinked them back, squeezing the older man's hand. I just did what needed to be done. Any good nurse would have recognized the signs, but not every nurse would have acted against orders, Diaz pointed out gently. That's what makes your case so powerful and legally interesting. Maria pulled out her phone. My brother-in-law sent this from Camp Pendleton this morning. It's happening at Marine bases across the country. The video showed hundreds of Marines doing push-ups in formation. The drill instructor could be heard calling out, "One more for Nurse Carter." As they completed another rep, Janelle's eyes widened. I never expected anything like this. Marines take care of their own, Mr. Rivera said simply. You saved one of ours. That makes you family now. Their conversation was interrupted by Janelle's phone ringing. It was an unknown number, but with Diaz's encouraging nod, she answered and put it on speaker. Miss Carter, this is Dr. Alan Patel from Memorial Hospital. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Janelle and Diaz exchanged glances. Not at all, Dr. Patel. I have my attorney with me as well as Staff Sergeant Rivera's family. There was a pause on the other end. I see. Well, perhaps that's for the best. I'm calling because the hospital board has been in emergency session this morning, reviewing the events of the past 2 days. And? Diaz prompted when Dr. Patel hesitated. And we've determined that the decision to terminate Ms. Carter's employment was hasty. We'd like to offer her position back, with a formal apology and a promotion to senior clinical educator for the emergency department. Janelle sat back stunned. Diaz leaned forward. That's an interesting development, Dr. Patel. However, Ms. Carter has already received multiple job offers, including positions at prestigious institutions like Walter Reed. What else are you prepared to offer? Another pause. We understand there may be legal considerations regarding wrongful termination. The hospital is prepared to offer a settlement for emotional distress and damage to Ms. Carter's reputation, and we'd like to implement a new protocol for emergency interventions, named in her honor, that provides clearer guidance for experienced nurses to act in life-threatening situations. I'll need to discuss this with my client, Diaz replied professionally. We'll be in touch. After ending the call, Diaz turned to Janelle with raised eyebrows. Well, that was faster than expected. They're clearly feeling the pressure. What do you think? Before Janelle could answer, Maria touched her arm. Michael's awake now and asking to meet you. Would you be willing to come see him before you make any decisions? Minutes later, Janelle stood in the doorway of a private room on the cardiac floor of Memorial Hospital, the same hospital that had fired her just yesterday. The security guard who had escorted her out now nodded respectfully as she passed. Hospital staff whispered and pointed, and the charge nurse had hugged her fiercely. In the bed, propped up on pillows and looking pale but alert, Staff Sergeant Michael Rivera watched her enter with a solemn expression. Despite his weakened state, he made an effort to sit up straighter. Nurse Carter, he said, his voice still rough from intubation, I've been waiting to thank you properly. Janelle moved to his bedside, automatically checking his monitors out of professional habit. You don't need to thank me, Staff Sergeant. I was just doing my job. From what I hear, it cost you your job, he replied. My wife told me what happened after you saved me. Janelle shrugged. Things are complicated right now, but I don't regret what I did for a second. Rivera gestured to the chair beside his bed. As Janelle sat, he continued. My team sergeant always told us that character reveals itself under pressure. That's when you find out who people really are. His eyes locked with hers. I'm alive because of who you are when it matters most. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Dr. Reeves stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. Nurse Carter, He began stiffly. I didn't expect to find you here. I came to check on Staff Sergeant Rivera. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Janelle nodded politely but said nothing. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. I owe you both an apology. Staff Sergeant Rivera, I misdiagnosed your condition in the ER. And Nurse Carter, I allowed my ego to cloud my judgment, both medically and professionally. Janelle blinked in surprise. This was the last thing she had expected. The board asked me to personally invite you to the meeting this afternoon to discuss your return, Dr. Reeves continued. But more importantly, I wanted to acknowledge that you were right. You saw what I didn't see and you had the courage to act on it. After Dr. Reeves left, Rivera chuckled weakly. Looks like you've got options, Nurse Carter. Too many, Janelle admitted. The hospital wants me back. Walter Reed offered me a position. 2 university hospitals have reached out. A healthcare advocacy group wants me to become their spokesperson. She shook her head in disbelief. 24 hours ago, I was worried about paying my mortgage next month. What do you want? Rivera asked simply. It was a question Janelle hadn't had time to consider amid the whirlwind of events. I just want to be a nurse, she said finally. To help people. To use the skills and judgment I've worked hard to develop. But I also want to change things so other healthcare workers don't face what I faced for doing the right thing. Then do both, Rivera suggested. The best leaders are the ones who keep their boots on the ground while working to change the system. Outside Rivera's room, Janelle found Diaz waiting with news. The attorney's eyes were bright with excitement. You've been invited to speak at a congressional hearing on healthcare reform next month, he said. And the American Nurses Association wants to present you with their Courage Award at their annual conference. Janelle leaned against the wall, feeling overwhelmed once again. This is all happening so fast. Fast is good, Diaz assured her. It means we have momentum. Now, about the hospital's offer. I need to think about it, Janelle said. Talk to Keisha. Figure out what's best for our future. As they walked through the hospital corridors, staff members nodded and smiled at Janelle. News of the board's change of heart had spread quickly. Outside, the Marines still stood in formation, maintaining their silent support. Janelle's phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. Mom, there's a news crew at Aunt Lucia's asking for an interview. And the principal called. They want you to speak at my graduation about courage and standing up for what's right. Are you coming home soon? Also, I Googled schools in Maryland just in case. Looking down at her daughter's message, Janelle felt a smile spread across her face. Whatever she decided, whether to accept the hospital's offer, move to Maryland for Walter Reed, or pursue one of the other opportunities suddenly before her, one thing was clear. The worst day of her professional life had somehow transformed into the beginning of something extraordinary. What are you thinking? Diaz asked, noting her expression. I'm thinking, Janelle replied, watching a group of nurses hanging a handmade "We Stand with Nurse Carter" banner in the hospital lobby. That sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, until it gives you something better in return. 3 months could change everything. Janelle adjusted her blazer as she walked down the long hallway of the Rayburn House office building in Washington, D.C. The polished marble floors reflected the overhead lights, and important-looking people hurried past with phones pressed to their ears. It was a world away from the hospital corridors she had walked for 15 years. You ready for this? Anthony Diaz asked, matching her stride. In the months since he'd taken on her case, he had become more than just her attorney. He was a trusted advisor and friend. As ready as I'll ever be, Janelle replied, smoothing her hand over her hair. Recently styled into a sophisticated bob for her new public role. Never thought I'd be testifying before Congress, that's for sure. They paused outside the committee room doors. Through the glass, Janelle could see the packed room. Journalists, healthcare professionals, military families, and congressional staffers filling every available seat. Cameras were positioned to capture the proceedings. Remember, Diaz said quietly, just tell your story. That's what they need to hear, the human reality behind the protocols and regulations. Janelle nodded, taking a deep breath. Her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced down to see a message from Keisha. Watching the live stream in class. Teacher got special permission. You got this, Mom. A second message followed immediately from an unexpected source. A photo of Staff Sergeant Michael Rivera, now fully recovered, watching the hearing on TV with his fellow Marines back at base. His caption read, Team Carter reporting for duty. Strengthened by their support, Janelle pushed open the heavy doors. 2 hours later, she sat before the Congressional Healthcare Reform Committee, her testimony completed. She had spoken clearly and directly about the events that had changed her life, saving Rivera, being fired, and the nationwide response that had followed. "Nurse Carter," said the committee chairwoman, leaning into her microphone, "your case has highlighted what many are calling a systemic problem in American healthcare, the tension between rigid protocols and the need for trained professionals to exercise judgment in emergency situations. Based on your experience, what changes would you recommend?" Janelle leaned forward, her voice steady. "Healthcare isn't just about following rulebooks. It's about people taking care of other people in their most vulnerable moments. We need protocols, yes, they exist for good reasons, but we also need to trust the judgment of experienced professionals who have dedicated their lives to patient care." She gestured to the crowded room. "Since my story became public, I've received over 2,000 messages from nurses, paramedics, physician assistants, and other healthcare workers who faced similar situations. Many were punished for making judgment calls that saved lives. Some left healthcare altogether because of it. We're losing good people because our system often values compliance over competence." A murmur ran through the audience. The chairwoman nodded thoughtfully. "And what would you suggest as a solution?" "We need what I call judgment protection provisions in healthcare regulations," Janelle explained. "Clear guidelines that protect clinicians who make good faith interventions in emergency situations when following standard protocol would result in patient harm. We need review boards that include peers who understand the realities of frontline healthcare. And most importantly, we need a culture that values speaking up when something doesn't seem right." As the hearing concluded, Janelle was surrounded by supporters, journalists, and healthcare advocates. The story that had begun in a trauma room 3 months ago had grown into a movement. Later that evening, Janelle stood on the balcony of her hotel room, looking out at the Washington Monument glowing in the distance. Her phone rang. Dr. Alan Patel from Memorial Hospital. "You were impressive today," he said when she answered. The entire hospital staff was watching. "Thank you," Janelle replied. "How are things going with the new protocols?" "The Janelle Carter Emergency Intervention Protocol has been implemented at 17 hospitals in our network now," Dr. Patel said with genuine pride. 3 documented cases already where it's made a difference. Nurses speaking up, doctors listening. Lives saved, Janelle smiled. After considering all her options, she had declined to return to Memorial Hospital as an employee. Instead, she had negotiated a different arrangement, serving as a consultant to help them develop new emergency protocols that would bear her name and be shared with hospitals nationwide. It had allowed her to effect change while pursuing other opportunities. "And Dr. Reeves?" she asked. The doctor who had demanded her firing had undergone his own transformation in the aftermath, leading a training series for residents on working effectively with nursing staff. Dr. Patel chuckled. "You'd hardly recognize him. He actually listens now." After ending the call, Janelle checked her email. The final details had come through for her new position at Georgetown University Hospital, Director of Emergency Nursing Education. The role would allow her to split her time between clinical work, teaching, and her growing advocacy efforts. Best of all, it came with faculty housing on campus, a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment where Keisha would have her own space as she prepared for college. Speaking of Keisha, Janelle glanced at her watch. Her daughter's flight from California should have landed by now. She had stayed behind to finish her final exams before joining her mother in their new home. A knock at the hotel room door brought a smile to Janelle's face. She opened it to find Keisha standing there, looking somehow older and more mature than she had just 2 weeks ago when Janelle had left for Washington. "Mom!" Keisha threw her arms around Janelle. "You were amazing. Everyone on my flight was watching clips from your testimony on their phones. The lady next to me actually cried when you talked about healthcare being about people taking care of people." Janelle hugged her daughter tightly. "I was just speaking the truth." "Well, your truth is changing things," Keisha said proudly. "My biology teacher says she's using your case as an example of ethics in modern medicine." As they caught up over room service dinner, Janelle's phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Congratulations, interview requests, invitations to speak at medical schools and nursing conferences. "Is it always going to be like this now?" Keisha asked, watching her mother's phone light up yet again. Janelle considered the question. I don't think so. Eventually this will calm down. I'll be just another nurse educator trying to make the system better. But for now, she shrugged. I think I need to use this platform while I have it. So many healthcare workers have faced what I faced without anyone hearing their stories. Like being a voice for the voiceless, Keisha suggested. Something like that. Janelle nodded. The next morning brought another unexpected meeting. Janelle had just finished breakfast when the hotel concierge called to tell her she had visitors in the lobby. She came downstairs to find Staff Sergeant Michael Rivera, his wife Maria, and their 2 children waiting. Surprise! Maria smiled, bouncing her baby son on her hip. Michael had a checkup at Walter Reed yesterday, and we heard you were in town testifying. Rivera looked completely different from the pale, critically ill patient Janelle had last seen in the hospital. Now he stood tall and healthy, his uniform crisp, his smile warm as he shook Janelle's hand. Had to come thank you in person, he said. Again. And properly this time, without all the tubes and monitors. You look wonderful, Janelle said, genuinely moved to see him fully recovered. How's the heart? Strong as ever, he tapped his chest. Doctors say there's no permanent damage. I've been cleared to return to full duty next month. Rivera's 5-year-old daughter tugged on Janelle's sleeve. My daddy says you're a hero, she said solemnly. Like him, but different. Janelle knelt down to the child's level. Your daddy's the real hero. I just helped him get back to you when he needed it. Later that day, as Janelle and Keisha explored the Georgetown neighborhood that would soon be their home, they passed a bookstore with a large display in the window. Healthcare at the Crossroads new release. The cover showed a stylized image of hands, one in a medical glove, one in a military uniform clasped together. Mom, look. Keisha pointed. That's the book about your case. Janelle shook her head in amazement. Dr. Lisa Chen, a prominent medical ethicist, had written the book analyzing the implications of what the media now called the Nurse Carter incident. Janelle had contributed a chapter about her personal experience, but she hadn't expected to see it featured so prominently. As they stood looking at the display, 2 nursing students walked past, engrossed in conversation. One of them was saying, So in the Carter scenario, what would you do? Follow protocol or trust your judgment? Carter scenario, Keisha whispered, nudging her mother with barely contained excitement. You're a scenario? Janelle laughed. Let's hope I'm a scenario that helps them make good decisions someday. That evening, they visited their new apartment on the Georgetown campus. As Keisha explored the bedrooms, deciding which one she wanted, Janelle stood by the window, looking out at the city that would be their new home. On the coffee table sat a stack of orientation materials for her new position, along with invitations to speak at 3 medical conferences and a handwritten note from the Surgeon General requesting a private meeting. Her phone rang, her mother calling from Atlanta. Just saw you on the news again. Baby, her mother said proudly. Your father would have been so proud. Thanks, Mom, Janelle said softly, thinking of her father who had passed away years ago. He had encouraged her to become a nurse when she was just a teenager, seeing in her the compassion and quick thinking the profession required. You know what I keep thinking about? Her mother continued. That morning when you called me right after you got fired, you were so worried. Didn't know how you'd pay the bills. And look at you now, changing the whole system. Janelle smiled. Life can change so fast. 1 minute you're just doing your job. The next minute you're testifying before Congress, her mother finished. But you know what hasn't changed? You're still the same Janelle who always stood up for what's right, even when it cost you. That's why all this is happening. Not because of luck or timing, but because of who you are. After the call, Janelle joined Keisha on their new balcony. The evening air was warm, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. So, Keisha said, leaning against the railing, if you could go back to that morning in the ER, knowing everything that would happen, would you still do the same thing? Janelle thought about the question. She thought about the fear of losing her job, the humiliation of being escorted out by security, the worry about her future. But she also thought about Rivera, alive and well with his family, about the protocols now changing in hospitals across the country, about the nurses who would be empowered to speak up because of her story. In a heartbeat, she said simply, some moments define who we are. That was mine. As mother and daughter looked out at the city that represented their new beginning, Janelle reflected on how a single decision, made in seconds during a medical crisis, had set in motion events that transformed not just her life, but potentially the lives of countless patients and healthcare workers. Sometimes doing the right thing cost everything, and sometimes it gave back more than you ever imagined possible.